Hello everybody and welcome back to LRN, as today we look at the top 5 takeaways from the Dutch GP. If you are new around here, please make sure to subscribe on the bottom right hand side if you are new to the channel. And we're going to get straight into it now with number 1 and the fact that we can still have some excitement when it comes to race wins this season. Obviously, we've seen over the last few Grand Prix, it's felt like it's just going to be the Verstappen show. He's certainly going to go and win his second Drivers' Championship, and it's certainly going to be a few more wins for Verstappen this season. But what we've seen today with the improvements in the Mercedes, and obviously it's going to be dependent on the tracks that we go to, hopefully we're going to continue to see these opportunities where strategy can really come into play, and especially if it's Mercedes that have the opportunity and the pace to worry the Red Bull outfit, we could see some surprise winners this season still. Obviously, I still expect Verstappen to be the overwhelming favourite for probably the rest of the Grand Prix for the season. But the sheer fact that we had an opportunity today, we had that option that if they got it right, if the race had gone the right way, Mercedes really had a great chance at a victory. Hamilton had a fantastic chance, obviously taken away from in the end, the difficult situation, whether to pit him again under the safety car. Obviously, Russell taking the initiative to come in on the softs, and that obviously allowed him to end up in second place. Hamilton losing out massively, and as we heard on the radio, really not happy with the way things played out. But the sheer fact that we had Hamilton there, putting in fastest laps, chasing down Verstappen, and also Verstappen struggling to make up the time to the Mercedes earlier in the race before we had the first round of VSC and safety car. It was just great to see. Great to have another team, not the Ferraris there at the front. Obviously, Ferraris have had their own struggles, but we know how efficient Mercedes are. And when they have the car, they have the team, they have the strategists, they will get it right. And they are our best bet at a team properly taking the fight to Red Bull when they get their car together. But the sheer fact that even at Verstappen's home Grand Prix in Holland, we had this excitement. He didn't just run away with it. Obviously, he had the quickest car, but the strategy came into play, whether they were going to go one stop, two stop. Obviously, Verstappen ended up hitting 4 times through the race due to the safety car conditions. But through that first half of the Grand Prix, when it was just that big, what if, they were clearly covering off the Ferraris. The Mercedes absolutely made the most of being sort of the car in the middle, the ones that they weren't really thinking about, and it played right into their hands, and we ended up having a really exciting race that really Ferrari didn't play much part in. It was all about the Mercedes versus the Mercedes versus the Red Bull in the end, and I think that was absolutely brilliant. So great to see. I hope to see more of that the rest of the year. Let's have more instances, but of course, we could have wet races, more safety cars, more VSCs, where it throws a spanner in the works in terms of strategy. It allows other teams to come into play. It stops Red Bull flying away at the front of the grid, and we get some really exciting strategic racing before the end of this season. Would be fantastic, but at least it's a sign, hopefully, of things to come. In number 2, then, we have the fact that Ferrari continue to shoot themselves in the foot when it comes to strategy and just silly mistakes. Of course, we saw with the pit stop for Carlos Sainz, where he's been called into the pit by the engineers, the mechanics weren't ready, the tyres weren't ready, no one's communicating in that team. It seems like there's just a complete mess when it comes not only to how it seems outwardly but inwardly. Binotto coming on to speak to Crofty and openly admitting it was an absolute mess. But it's one fully of their making. There was no outside extraneous circumstances. They created the problem, and it was up to them to fix it, and they can't do it. They just keep making mistake after mistake. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Someone in that team needs to take responsibility for what's going wrong and make clear, obvious changes to the backroom staff at Ferrari. And if it means Binotto having to leave, if Ferrari make the choice to get rid of him because he refuses to admit that there are fundamental issues at Ferrari, and there simply are. They are not good enough. They're not a good enough outfit to challenge, regardless of how good their car is. Even if they had fundamentally the fastest car this season, which at times we probably think they have had, they cannot win consistently because they do not have a professional, a world-class outfit behind them to actually produce race-winning strategies and race-winning decisions, and just simple things like getting the pit stops right. As Ted Kravitz came out and said, they see them practicing the pit stops over and over again, but that doesn't help. It doesn't matter how good you are at taking the tires off and putting them back on again when you haven't practiced your communication between the mechanics and put clear rules in place around how it will work when you're calling someone in. What is the process? How do we go through a specific process before a car is allowed to be told box? There should be a really clear time specific process that prevents those issues where Carlos Sainz in this instance is coming into the pit when the tires are not ready. Now obviously we've seen it happen to teams in the past, but this season is just another example of all the issues that Ferrari have, and it is not good enough. And as an F1 fan, I want to see them challenging. I want to see them taking the fight to Red Bull. They have been our best hope this season in terms of pure car performance, of challenging the Red Bulls this year, and they have failed miserably. And it is time now for them to make a change. It is time for someone at Ferrari to just say enough is enough and make a change. If that's Binotto, if that's the head strategist, if it's bringing in a second, maybe support head strategist to work with the team, making sure they're making the right decisions. They need to clearly have some work on the communication that goes on internally between the teams during the races and how that's going to work moving forward. But they must know this. They have to know this. And if Binotto's the kind of person to bury his head in the sand, be really stubborn, and pretend there's not a problem, then he is the problem. If that isn't the case, if that's just what he's saying outwardly, and then they are going to make changes, that's fine. But it's not good enough to wait until the summer. It's not good enough to wait until next season or when opportunities present themselves. They need to be clearly making decisions now, bringing in new personnel, different personnel, making any change they can to fix these issues, because they're not going to fix themselves. They're not suddenly going to become a world-class outfit overnight. There are fundamental problems at Ferrari that need resolving, and they're not going to be fixed on their own. So it may take someone, a head honcho in the Ferrari world, to actually make a decision on whether it's Binotto or someone beneath them that needs to go or be changed or have support brought in. I say I'm not trying to advocate for people losing their jobs, but something has to happen at Ferrari if they are ever going to get back to being the outfit they used to be. It's a sad state of affairs to see such a prestigious team struggle the way that they are, especially when there's so much riding on their success when it comes to the excitement of the sport at the moment. So let's just hope they can get it together. But I cannot stand continuing to see all of these issues that Ferrari continue to cause for themselves. On the back of that one then, and in at number 3, we have Mercedes as the new favourites, in my opinion, to finish second in the Constructors' Championship this season. I think when you look at all the issues Ferrari have had this season and continue to face, and the resurgence of Mercedes, and given that there is only a 30-point disadvantage, so we've got Mercedes on 346 points at the moment after the Dutch Grand Prix, to Ferrari on 376. That is only a 30-point deficit. And I think when you can consider 30 points, that's, and the issues Ferrari have had with their engine reliability as an example, it only takes a couple more DNS for Ferrari and their power unit for Mercedes to suddenly find themselves ahead of Ferrari. And I would back them, even with a slightly slower car, to get their strategy calls right, to get the weekend calls right, and end races ahead of Ferrari on a consistent enough basis, especially given the bulletproof nature of the Mercedes power unit, and end the season ahead of Ferrari. Because Ferrari, as I've said in the previous bit, are not good enough. They're not clean and crisp enough when it comes to their decision making. Mercedes are a well-drilled, proven, championship-winning outfit, and so even with the slower car they have this season, I suspect that Mercedes are going to come through and actually finish the season ahead of Ferrari, which, if does happen, heads will need to roll at Ferrari if they allow that to be the case, when they have had by far the better car for the majority of this 2022 season. So we'll see how it plays out, but Please let me know in the comments below if you agree. Do you think Mercedes are going to catch up to Ferrari and overtake them by the end of the season? Do you think they need to see consequences at Ferrari should that happen? Do make sure to let me know that in the comments below. But for me, Mercedes are now clear favourites to finish second in the Constructors' Championship. In at number 4, then, we have the fact that Alpine have taken a big advantage in the battle for 4th place in the Constructors' Championship over McLaren. So when you look at the championship stakes, we've got Alpine now on 125 points in 4th in the Constructors' standings, ahead of McLaren on 101 points, way ahead of Alfa Romeo in 6th. So Alfa back on 51 points, and they're more sort of in a battle with Haas, but Haas are still 17 points behind them in 7th. So I think Alfa Romeo are probably going to finish 6th this season. McLaren way ahead of them then, pretty much double the points, on 101 for McLaren, Mercedes, and then Alpine, Renault 125 points. So we've got a 24-point advantage for Alpine now over McLaren, which is a huge percentage gain. 25% ahead of McLaren now at this stage of the season. And you just have to think that McLaren, given the struggles we've seen them have, given how much we've seen Ricciardo specifically struggle in the McLaren to get results out of that car, I do not think that unless there are big upgrades brought to the McLaren team, we're going to see them be able to overhaul the Alpine. Overall, looking at all the tracks, the different layouts, high downforce circuits, balance, and low downforce tracks, we've seen that the Alpine overall on the balance of things has been the more consistent performer over the last sort of 5 to 10 races, and I haven't seen any evidence that's going to change. We know Norris can outperform the car. We know Norris can take the fight to the Alpines even when his car isn't necessarily as quick as those around him, because he is that good a driver. Obviously, we did the ratings episode on the channel, and I've got Norris up there in 2nd place this season in terms of his driving performances, purely because his ability to outperform the McLaren that he's driving. And he's been absolutely phenomenal this season, make no mistake about that. But Ocon and Alonso themselves have been extremely consistent. We saw the strategy decisions today from Alpine really pay dividends. Obviously, you saw Alonso pretty much come from nowhere. They pit him early on the hard tyres. Huge pace on that tyre. They took a gamble. It paid off. He ended up jumping ahead of Ocon. And then we saw a good race between Alonso and Norris at the end of the race. So really good things being seen from Alpine in terms of their fight for the midfield. Obviously, grander scheme, we want to see Alpine also be putting in the investment and the ambition to go and challenge at the front. And you have to assume, based on the fact that Alonso wanted to leave Alpine, the fact that Piastri didn't want to drive for Alpine, and that he saw McLaren as a better prospect, you have to think behind the scenes, and I know Christian Horner's alluded to this before, that we are not seeing the ambition to really go and challenge it. They may say that they want to, of course, go and win championships again, but we're not there. It doesn't appear that behind the scenes people are confident that Alpine are making the right calls to go and challenge right at the front. But when it comes to this season and where they are and their battle for 4th place in the Constructors, which is a huge win to be best of the rest. Obviously, Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes has been so consistently the best teams in F1 now for a little while. So for them to be, for Alpine to jump ahead of, stay ahead of McLaren, and be the best of the rest this season would be a huge win for them. And you'd hope they'd use it as a platform to go and jump and try and catch those teams in front. Along with McLaren, we know the investment McLaren's been making to try and make that jump themselves. But it's a really exciting race. I think we know that the Constructors' Championship's done and the Drivers' Championship's done. It's going to go to Red Bull in both factors. It's going to go to Max Verstappen for the drivers. So the battles this season, the ones to really get excited about for me, are the battle for 2nd between Ferrari and Mercedes now, and the battle for 4th between Alpine and McLaren. I think those battles are the ones we're going to see play out that are going to be really exciting. So make sure to keep an eye on those as we go through the final races of the season, and expect them to play a big part in Drive to Survive when we get that the new Drive to Survive season for this year with the new regs. Expect these battles to end up playing a huge part of the show, because I think this, we've seen it before with the midfield battles. They do a really good job in Drive to Survive bringing it to life, even if it isn't always fact, or a lot of it is fiction or exaggerated reality when it comes to the storytelling. The battle we're seeing at the moment between Alpine and McLaren is a really interesting one, and one I'm really excited to see play out over the rest. Finally then, and in at number 5, a really sort of sad one is just Daniel Ricciardo and the fact that he appears to have completely checked out in his career as a Formula 1 driver. Now, I know he won't obviously come out and say this, but you look at the results he's having, you look at the fact that I know he had issues in qualifying, he got caught up in the Vettel incident that meant that he qualified way down in 17th. But at no point today did it look like he was going to make gains through the field. He's one of the first people to get lapped. He just didn't look like he was part of the race today. He didn't look like threatening to overtake or go on to a strategy that was going to make any difference. I don't think McLaren could have done anything or made any different decisions to help him get through the field. Obviously, he pitted early. He could have gone and put in really big laps and ended up jumping a few people in the pit stop strategy. He didn't. He just made no waves in the race at all. Now, of course, we didn't get to see a huge amount of his race. You never do. Someone at the back, largely on his own. You're not going to see that play out over the race. It's really difficult to do an in-depth review of how his actual race went. But the sheer fact that we didn't see any of his, performance, any overtakes, we didn't see him move through the grid. We had Norris showing how good the McLaren is, continuing to have it up, fighting around the Ferraris, keeping pace with Carlos Sainz, keeping pace with Fernando Alonso at the end, coming in and then battling Alonso, trying to overtake him at the end of the race. So we've seen from Norris that the performance in the McLaren is there, and you have to believe that if Norris was the one down in 17th, that he would have made strides through the field. He would have found a way to make those overtakes, and he would have ended up performing in a way that would have got him probably around, 10th, 9th, 10th, battling it out for the final points, starting down in 17th, because I think Norris is good enough to do that. But Ricciardo just didn't seem like he wanted to. Maybe he just can't anymore. Maybe he really is the case that Ricciardo just doesn't have that ability anymore, because mentally, in my opinion, it looks like he's checked out. Now, it's not really... It may be that now that it's official, he's leaving. We know the Piastri contract situation was there to obviously up for debate, and obviously that's now been resolved. Piastri is officially signing for McLaren and will be driving for them next season. Maybe the fact that that's all become official has had a mental impact on Ricciardo. Maybe that he has been down a bit this week, thinking about how he may not get a drive. Obviously, Gasly now is favourite for the Alpine seat. So maybe it's dawning on him that he doesn't have the opportunity to stay in F1 for next season, and maybe that's impacted his drive. I don't know. It's all hearsay and conjecture, but I don't think it's too outlandish to suggest that, given the performance we've just seen from him, and I know we've had bad performances from him this season, but this was particularly bad. I think for him not to make any strides through the grid was really, really poor. And just to not see anything of him, it was just like he didn't exist. For me, during the race, you would have been forgiven to forget that he was there. And I think that's really sad for what Norris has shown is a really good car. And I would really want to see more of him, and I really hope he has a good couple of results left in him before the end of the season with McLaren. I think it would be great to see. But certainly it's easy to see also why, if no other teams go for him, why that's the case. He simply just doesn't seem to have the fight, the heart, the fire, or maybe even the ability now to put in the performances that he used to. But we'll see over the final race of the season. I hope he manages to find a seat, if not in F1, then in a similar competitive sport, whether it be Indy or Formula E, although he has turned down those opportunities quite recently when offered to him by McLaren. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But certainly, I hope it's a weekend blip. I hope that he can get over it. He's got people around him. It'll, help give him that fire to go out with a bang, and he'll be determined to finish on a high. That's how I hope things will play out for Danny Ric. But certainly on today's evidence, he's had a really tough weekend, and it's going to be one he's going to want to forget very, very quickly. But anyway, guys, that's been my top 5 things to take away from the Dutch Grand Prix and the weekend we've just seen of Formula 1. So really excited to get into the next race. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And as I said earlier, if you are new around here, please make sure to subscribe on the bottom right-hand side so you are notified of all future uploads on the channel. Otherwise, I'm just going to thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. Goodbye.